I got an action figure.
Do you know, that was actually one of the questions. I nearly asked you if you had an action figure or like how many you had.
I got this one too. You know the best part about having your own action figure? You get to play with yourself in public.
Damn it, I was going to say you can have a Barbie.
And I was Doink also.
You were?
Yeah, I was Doink 2 times. I think Doink should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He is a character worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. He's been around for over 25 years. He's instantly recognizable. The fans love him. He's always over, and the people leave with a smile. He deserves to be, and everybody that played Doink should get a Hall of Fame ring, which includes me.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, would you actually put Matt Bourne in, or would you put Doink the Clown in, and would Dink go in with him?
I don't know about Dink, but Matt Bourne was the originator, so I think you got to go with him. He's the one that gave it life.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I think everyone else more or less ruined it.
Kern, Brawler, myself, I believe one of the headbangers was also a Doink, and Ray Apollo. Ray Apollo was Doink for a long time.
Steve Lombardi, he was one as well, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, Brawler, Brooklyn Brawler.
Is he not in the thing yet? Is he not in the Hall of Fame yet, Brooklyn Brawler? I would have thought he'd be a shoo-in. No, fair enough. He deserves it. I think he deserves it anyway. If nothing else,
he's a great guy, awesome guy.
I mean,
he's fit. Have you seen him lately?
No.
Have you seen him lately on his Twitter? Man, he's fit and he's out doing the Independence.
Is he still doing the Independence? I mean, how old is he? He's like 60 now.
I mean, he might be mid-50s. Looks good though. Looks really good.
Yeah, I've seen him slim down a lot. I even saw he had a book out a few years ago as well.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to go straight onto it. I'm going to be direct to myself. I've got to press a button, so I will forget this on occasion, and I might just have to restart.
You're going to yell at yourself when you screw up like a director?
Absolutely. You can yell at me as well. I feel better for it as well.
I don't yell at anybody. Eugene doesn't yell at anybody.
Fair enough then. I'll yell at myself. I will not yell at you. Before I carry on, do you watch the current product, WWE, AEW, anything like that?
I mean, I follow like it on Twitter and I see the headlines. I might watch a little bit, but I'm not viewing everything.
Fair enough then. I'll probably leave out the AEW stuff. Actually, I might ask you one question, actually, and go straight through that. And I suppose the first one is, AEW seems to have a lot of WWE talent going at the moment. And I actually made mention of this a few weeks ago with Just Incredible. And he was saying, God, it's sort of turning a bit like TNA, you know, with all the WWE superstars migrating. And since then, we've had Big Show and Christian going over. What would be a word of caution of maybe using too much established talent from another company?
I don't think there's any word of caution. I think it gives them more credibility. Those stars are instantly recognizable. And it's also that shock value of like, oh my gosh, somebody just jumped ship. It reminds me more, it doesn't remind me of TNA. It reminds me more of almost Nitro when guys were starting to jump ship. And with a viable another company where guys can make money, that's incredible. That's what the business needs.
It's funny, you know, I was actually going to plow straight through to USWA, which was actually your first territory of note that you were, or company of note. Yep. But I'll actually go to WWF and WCW. So, which was better, I suppose? Because I didn't realise that you actually did enhancement work for both companies. How would you compare the two?
Like I did WCW first. So I was very nervous and I didn't know anybody and I was there by myself and I was young. I did well, but then Terry Taylor was the one that saw me. He saw me at the Brian Pillman Memorial Show and got me to come in a couple of times, I think 11 times on WCW. I did 2 Nitros and 3 Thunders and Saturday nights. And then Terry Taylor got fired and he got hired by WWE. And then he hires me as a WWE developmental talent. And I did a lot more extra work, but then I started to know people. So I was a little bit more comfortable. I can't say one was better than the other. They were both great experiences and they were awesome. But I mean, Nitro at the time was on top. I mean, with all the big ratings, and that was like really cool to be there.
Did you particularly get starstruck with meeting anyone?
I'm sure. Actually. So I was in a car. I wrestled Wrath on Nitro in pretty much a squash match, but it was, you know, it came off well. So we went to where Thunder was like Virginia Beach or something. And he goes, hey, you want to jump in the car with me? Sure. So I jumped in the car and British Bulldog got in the car. And I was a huge Bulldogs fan. So I'm just sitting in the back seat like, oh my God. And so we check in the hotel. Right next to the hotel is a Denny's. So we go, I went to eat at Denny's. I'm sitting at one table. Bulldog sits down at a different table. And all the fans are clamoring around him asking for autographs. And he gets up and he looks at me. He goes, hey, I'll give you a call in about an hour and we'll go to the gym. And all the fans looked at me and I was like, that's all right. But he played a joke on me. I saw him in the lobby. He goes, Thunder's been canceled. I said, what? Thunder? Yeah, my wife called. It's been canceled. And I'm freaking out. And all of a sudden I see Dean Malenko. Dean, has Thunder been canceled? He goes, it's a live broadcast. They don't cancel it. Okay.
Was that just it? It's cancelled. Go home. Did he try and get you to go home?
He was trying to see if I would leave.
So is there any difference in WWF then? I mean, like, I suppose you've been in the business an extra year. I mean, would you get, I don't know, because I'd probably get starstruck still, you know, if I met, like, who were the biggest stars? The Rock, let's say. I get so starstruck, I couldn't even go up to him. By the time you've been in the business a few years, would you just be able to shake hands, say hello, and carry on a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I did get nervous when, what was I going to say? I can't remember. I lost my train of thought. Go on.
Oh, fair enough then. I'll skip ahead on that, and I'll go back to USWA. We've all heard the horror stories of the payoffs and also doing the loop around. Are they as bad? Let's say not only the payoffs, which I imagine maybe I'll have a guess at $40 a night. Were you also doing some pretty rotten venues as well?
Well, the venues actually weren't that bad. At the time, I was going to college. So I was going to college on Tuesday and Thursday, and I had a part-time job that they would let me work around. We would go, Tuesday night was Louisville Gardens, so that was my hometown. Then Saturday, we would drive. There might be a spot show on Friday. Sometimes there was, sometimes there wasn't. Saturday, we would drive for TV in Memphis in the morning, 7-hour drive from Louisville to Memphis. And then generally Nashville was after that. And I always loved the building in Nashville. And that was the building that TNA ran, also the fairgrounds. So that was about 4 hours from Memphis to Nashville. And then they would do some casino boats down there, and they'd do some other spot shows like that. When they first called me in, I was training at the Danny Davis School of Wrestling, which became OVW. I rode my bicycle because I was trying to get in shape, and I get to training, and Danny goes, Dean Hill called from over at the Gardens. They need an extra guy. You got your stuff, get over there. So I had to pedal my ass home and speed over there, and I get in there, and Dean goes, all right, it's April Fool's Day, April Fool's. And my heart just sank. But then he goes, no, I'm just kidding. He goes, I wrestled Tank from the South African Truth Commission, who was also Mantar, real big guy. So after that, they're like, hey, we would like to hire you. You're going to get, I don't know, I think they said $250 a night or something, but you can take 40 up front in cash. So we get our 40 and get the rest in a check. I never saw one check. I was young and I was excited. So the traveling wasn't too bad. It was exciting to me. I was still learning. The towns were good. I mean, it was pretty cool.
I always have to ask, but everyone seems to have a horror story about Jamie Dundee when they worked with him. Did you work with him for starters, or was he in WWF by then?
No, I haven't worked with Jamie, but I love Jamie. I've been around Jamie a lot of times. Jamie's always cool. He's a good guy.
One person you did wrestle, though, was Dutch Mantel. You must have
the
learned
Dirty
something
Dutchman.
of him. Yeah, the Dirty Dutchman.
Dirty Dutchman, yeah. We wrestled in Nashville, in the building in Nashville, and Dutch must have seen something that he liked, because he was like, okay, let me work with this kid. And the first night we went time limit draw, 10-minute time limit draw. And then I think he beat the bejesus out of me, got the whip on me, whipped me in the front of the crowd. So the next time we came back, I think we ended up fighting all over the arena. And after that, the people in Nashville like really took to it. He got me over in that building. Dutch is a great guy.
Did he give you the usual advice of if you want to improve, you better sit down and watch every single match?
Yeah, not that so much. I mean, he really got me in the ring and took me by the hand. And say, hey, let's do this. Come on, fire up. And knew exactly how to play that crowd. And when you're the guy that's being led by a veteran like that, that's how you really learn. That's how you learn how to work, is being in there with somebody, and you can feel the crowd. He settles it down. He picks it up, do a little something, shut it down, whatever it is.
Did you ever have the pleasure of getting punched by Bill Dundee at a working manner?
No, but I was in a battle royal on Raw one time, and Ric Flair and Jerry Lawler were in the battle royal. Flair's beating on Eugene in the corner. He looks at Lawler, go, hey, here's my Lawler punch. And not very often do you see Flair punch. He'll chop and he'll kick, but he punched me right in the eye, boom, black eye. I come to TV the next Monday with a big black eye, and Lance K was like, well, who gave you a black eye? And I couldn't say Ric Flair did it. I couldn't say that. So then I started blaming it on Lance K. That's whenever he did it.
Poor Lance K as well. Right, okay, I've already skipped through that and I've sort of jumbled up a bit. I'm going to go straight to OVW. So you did say OVW, before it was OVW, was just a wrestling school, so it was just the nearest one to you that you happened to pick?
Yeah, I knew that the Jarretts had a school in Hendersonville, Tennessee, which was about 3.5 hours from Louisville, where I lived. But I ended up going to high school with a girl, and her dad was Nightmare Danny Davis. I was at like the the ceremony for prom, king and queen, or no, it was homecoming. And they said over the loudspeaker, Nick Dinsmore wants to be a pro wrestler. And she came up and said, hey, my dad has a school. So I went and saw it. And it was the Nightmare Danny Davis School of Wrestling. And they would have wrestling matches on Sundays at the school. It was in a real small building. And that's where I signed up in 1996, May of 96.
So they weren't doing tours then at that time, just a once a week show for locals, and that was it.
Yeah, we would train 3 days a week, and then we would do a show. I mean, we did do some other, towns around the area. He might have had 4 or 5 towns that we ran. So, I mean, I might get 6 to 8 matches a month.
To be honest, that's probably a lot more. I mean, COVID, forget about the COVID. That was probably a lot more than a lot of independent wrestlers were getting
absolutely
in 2019.
Absolutely.
So, was it just Danny Davis who was teaching at that point, or when did Rip Rogers come along?
I think Rip was in, when I first signed up, I'd seen Rip when I went to watch before I signed up. When I signed up, Rip was, I believe he was in the Maritimes with Rene Dupree's dad's company. And so I trained, had a couple months worth of matches, and Rip comes back. And then Rip was then the leader that took me by the hand and really taught me how to work. I mean, in front of the crowd, I wrestled him at least once a week. And at the beginning, he would still kayfabe everybody. I mean, he was a 42-year-old bodybuilding man, fresh off WCW, and he'd walk up and he'd look at you and, mean face and be, do you want to have a real match tonight, or do you want to have a phony match? And I looked at him and said, whatever you want, sir. I didn't know what that meant. So he would go out there, and I mean, he really, sometimes he would give me a finish, sometimes he wouldn't. And we'd just go out there and he would just leave me, and that's where I learned how to work. And that's,
Were you never tempted to ask for a phony match? Because it looks like he could give you a real hard match.
Not until I really got to know him. And then I said, let's have a real phony match and do all the moves that we see on TV.
Fair enough then. Did you ever see that John Cougar Mellencamp video where he's doing the bodybuilding? That's probably the first place I ever saw him. It was actually in that video.
I believe that was the Cherry Bomb video, but I could be mistaken. I think he's actually been in 2 of them. And one of them, it was like a home footage when he was a kid, but you wouldn't know who it is.
So if we're going on OVW's greatest hits as far as trainers go, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, of course, Jim Cornette, my favourite. When he came aboard mid-1999, I believe?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, we had, we started doing TV about 97. And looking back now, Danny Davis was learning how to do TV and getting prepped because he knew the deal with WWE was coming, and we had to have a television product. So it was all of us students and Rip, and it was a good product, but not all the students were great athletes or, great performers, but everybody was having fun. And then 1998, Cornette shows up. The first recruit he had was Rico Constantino. And Rico we saw on WWE TV was very different than the Rico that came to OVW. He won the American Gladiators. He was a policeman. He was an EMT. He was the bodyguard for the faith healer Benny Hinn's. He was a bodyguard for Kiss. I mean, he was almost a U.S. Marshal after 9/11. I mean, it was like, this guy's got like a resume of stuff that is phenomenal. And he had his own American Gladiators belt, and he was, ultra babyface. But then he ended up injuring his knee, and he had to shift his performance, and that when he became a heel. And it was really good. But like Cena came at that same time, Batista came, Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, Victoria.
Well, I'm going to get on quite a few of those names as well. I've got a couple more Cornette questions. I'm a big Cornette fan. When was the first time he ever lost his mind at you or someone near you?
At me? I knew him a while before he lost his cool at me. But I remember, and I told this story not too long ago, he would always put like the Danny's guys, myself, Doug Basham, Damaja, and Flash, and Rob Conway, Flash Flanagan. We were all the guys that had a little bit of experience. So if we're doing TV, we're doing it live to tape. So he didn't want to do any editing. So he put us in the last match so we could hit the time cue at the very end so we didn't go over. And the first time Cornette put Randy Orton against John Cena in the main event, they went over like 2 minutes and 19 seconds. And I remember Cena's coming back all proud of his match because it was a good match, taking off his tape, and Cornette kicks in the locker room. God damn, 2 minutes and 19 seconds. You know what the fuck that means? 2 minutes. You son of a. And Randy conveniently snuck out and just went home. Cornette goes out back and starts breaking windows. The building was, half the building was abandoned, so it wasn't a big deal, but breaking windows and coming back in, 2 minutes and 19 seconds. You know what that means? And Cena said himself, he goes, that was the last time I ever went over on time.
So it was 2 minutes 19. That was that, and he couldn't even edit it down. So he went just live to tape, and that was it.
Yeah, they ended up having to edit it down, but they were trying not to do it. And then that would, if they would just run it the tape, they could hand it into the TV studio. Now they had to go and edit it. And it was going to take them 4 or 5 hours to trim a couple seconds off each segment, and just a hassle.
Right, I'm gonna hit you with the hard question now, and it is no pun intended. Did Jim Cornette and his girlfriend at the time, Sin, ever proposition you at any point? Because apparently only this came out recently, and I had no idea.
Me, no. Their relationship was, they were both happy doing exactly what they did. But there was one time where he was editing a little bit of TV or doing some voiceovers, and she liked to go out. So he's like, hey, will you take her to the bar? I'll show up a little bit later and pick her up. And he'd been out to the bar a couple of times, but he didn't like going out to the bar, but she wanted to go out. So we're out, bum, bum, bum. And she goes, well, hey, I'm going to go see if this guy will buy me a drink. And she walks off. And I can't remember if I just lost her or if I ended up finding her by the end of the night and had to take her home. But regardless, Cornette came and he couldn't find her. And then he got pissed and he left. So I think I must have had to take her home, and she was just sloppy drunk. It was bad. And Cornette was throwing a fit. He was screaming down the hallway that he's ready to shoot me, and just, it was the worst thing ever. I got fired and everything.
Oh, blinking heck. I mean, he threatened to shoot Brock Lesnar as well, I think, at one point, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, after a while, that wasn't a big thing. It was just him blowing off steam and just getting excited.
I like it. It's just like not a big deal that he threatened to shoot everybody one time or another. So we always call it the OVW Big Four. So we've got John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Batista. I suppose should go really back a bit. Did you have a hand in training any of them more than informally? Were you like I suppose I'll switch the question up and actually, did you ever become sort of like an informal head trainer?
Absolutely. At the time that all those guys came, we were in Southern Indiana on Watt Street. And if you ever see any of the videos that has the big pole right next to the ring, that was the Mechanic Street. I'm sorry, it's Mechanic Street building. And it was a little rundown. It wasn't real nice. And WWE was urging them to get a bigger, better facility. So Danny found a building in Louisville, big, nice building that if you see any of the current stuff, that's where it is. Well, in the time that he was looking for buildings and measuring and doing all that stuff, I would take the training, myself and Rob Conway. And yeah, I worked with all of them. I was showing them how to do moves. We would run spots. I would wrestle against them. And then I would wrestle them at the shows. And then there were a couple independents around the area. Sometimes I would take I took Randy with me to a couple independent shows. And really, I was a player coach, working with all of them. We'd work on something in training. And then Victoria was with the Revolution, Doug Basham and Danny Basham, and then we'd implement it in the matches.
So I know this might have happened a bit later, but did Randy Orton ever defile anyone's bag or rub his cock and then shake hands with anybody?
I don't think he'd been fully corrupted then. He was still pretty young and naive.
Fair enough then. So of the four, I mean, obviously, I think Cena had the best attitude from all reports and things I've heard of. Who was maybe the most difficult sort of mold into the professional wrestler that OVW or WWE would expect?
I mean, not really any of them. I mean, really, because they were all there, and they knew what they were there for, and we were just trying to figure out what their strengths were, accentuate their strengths, and hide their weaknesses and work on their weaknesses. And that's all it was. We'd find out what this person does best, and let's work on that.
Right, I believe I heard a Jim Cornette podcast from quite a few years ago, and he described on more than one occasion that there was, I don't know if it was a physical list, it probably was a physical list, of everybody who should have been called up to WWE from first to last in order of worthiness. I believe your name was always top. Did you ever see the list, or did you have any opinion on the hierarchy of who should go up?
Like I never saw a physical list. I mean, that might have been his thing that he sent to the office. But when I was training in OVW, I never thought I would make it to WWE. I thought I would be a trainer coach at OVW. I thought I was just kind of signed on to be the crash dummy for all the WWE developmental guys, and I was cool with that, because I was doing what I loved. I was making money. I was living at home, and then after a while, I would see when Rob got called up and then the Bashams got called up. And I'm like, well, heck, and I saw like a lot of guys complain and all of a sudden they would get called up. Like the Samoans, Umaga and Rosie, they started complaining a little bit. All of a sudden they're on TV. a few other guys. And I don't like Louisville. I don't like being on Hair Boom. They're on TV. So I told Doug Basham, I said, I think I'm going to quit and try to go to Japan, which I didn't know anybody in Japan. And I really didn't have any, I wasn't going to do that. Doug told Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace tells Vince, and all of a sudden I'm in a meeting with Vince McMahon. And Vince goes, I want to get back to character-based wrestling. So pause that. A couple months earlier, Rip Rogers had given me an idea for a character. His son has autism, and he's like, what about a character that, isn't very social, maybe can't tie his shoes, can't put the square peg in the square hole, but he knows wrestling perfectly, and he does all the moves. Idiot savant. He knows all the history, all the trivia. Okay? Flash forward to that meeting with Vince, I just spit that out. He goes, great, we'll start on Monday. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? Because I had no idea who the character was. So it was just like now they would do character research and they would flesh this character out in their performance skills class and really find out who this character is. And I had to kind of go out there and do it. But I knew at the time Raw and SmackDown were split brands, and Hurricane was the only kids character. And I knew that there was a kids character needed on Raw. And everybody, this was post Austin, post NWO, everybody wanted to be a cool, strong heel and be tough. And I said, I'm going to be the exact opposite. I'm going to be a sympathetic baby face that gets beat up and does comedy. And it worked.
Right, I had the complete opposite idea in my mind. So I purposely, I researched the questions. I don't want to research the answers because I want to hear it from horse's mouth sort of thing. I had it in my mind that the character was given to you, and I was actually going to use the thing, because if the character was given to me, I would sort of think, and this is, don't take this in this place, I would have thought this might hurt my chances with the ladies on the road. Was that a consideration?
No, I was engaged and with my lady that I'm married to now, so that really wasn't a concern. I was a kid's character. And for the most like a lot of the travel, I traveled with William Regal. So it was, we were just Barnum and Bailey circus 24/7.
It's funny you mention actually William Regal, because the very first WWE show I went to was probably your first show in Manchester as well. It was in 2004, and you won the tag titles from La Resistance on Raw. Mm-hmm. And then, in fact, do you actually remember what happened? Because yep. you might as well say.
Yeah, they went to commercial, came back up, and I think the Bischoff reversed it or restarted the match in the commercial.
Yeah.
Because I think we came back up and we were still wrestling. And I felt like that was kind of like they had to do it for time, but I felt like that was kind of a weird thing. And by the reaction we got, it was the wrong swerve, I think.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, because the tag team, what harm would it have done? A hometown hero, you're the big babyface, kids love him. What harm would it have done to just put the titles on you? Well,
they were trying to get heat on Bischoff because then he and I were going into the pay-per-view together. Mm. But I think Bischoff already had heat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he definitely had. Oh, man, yeah, everyone hated him. But going back to the match, though.
Instead of having us win, he just should have come out and did something to cause me to lose and not win at all.
Yeah, Regal, man, he was so popular. He was the most popular person. Do you remember when the punches happened? And I'd never heard that before. And the entire crowd was going, boo, yay, boo, yay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think, and I love Regal, and I think his time with Eugene almost made him a little more human, because you saw that struggle of him being, stiff upper lip heel, and then all of a sudden he's starting to care for this character, and you saw him have passion and empathy for another human being, which he's always kind of been snooty.
Was it always the plan to make him a good guy by teaming with you, or was it just the audience pushed it that way?
I don't know. Like the reason Eugene really worked is because Brian Gerwick, the writer, could write for it. Brian Gerwick wrote a majority of the Rock stuff, and he saw a character. And this is what I tell guys when they're trying to get into WWE now. You can have a great character and great catchphrases and great body, but if a writer can't write for you, you're not going to make it on TV. And I was fortunate enough that Gerwick could really write for Eugene. He wrote a movie for Eugene.
What was the film?
And that was the movie that Big Show was in. Knucklehead was Eugene's movie, but he could write for me, and he wrote Regal in there as the big odd couple, because Regal was coming back after that. He went to India and got parasite on his heart and had a long recovery from that, and that way he also didn't necessarily have to wrestle as he was coming back, and it would just work. Like he and I just clicked, much like he and Tajiri just had magic and their stuff. we just clicked like that. And it was like, I don't know, I can't explain. I haven't really had that kind of connection with someone on TV with anybody else. It was just on.
So was he just because I'd love to, like, Regal's probably in my top 5 that I'd love to talk to, but obviously he's tied up with WWE. I doubt I'd ever get to talk to him unless he left. How cool a guy was he? Because I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah, we used to travel up the road together, and you know, I stayed at his house. I would usually book the hotels, and when we first started riding, Tajiri would ride with us. And Tajiri never said a word. He might talk on the phone in Japanese, but then at the end of the night, he might say one thing, but it was always like a funny something. And I remember Regal, to mess with Tajiri, got a harmonica at a Cracker Barrel, and we'd drive and he'd pick it up and he'd play the harmonica. He didn't know how to play it, but he would just blow on it for a couple minutes and set it down. He'd let an hour go by and he'd do it again. So the next morning we get up and Tajiri and myself are there, we're waiting on Regal. Tajiri grabs the harmonica and goes, "Hurt," and then sets it back. It was the funniest thing.
How much fun was it shaving Eric Bischoff's head?
Man, it sucked because you got to have hair clippers. And they gave me like beard trimmers, which never work because if it gets sweaty, it just and I'm ripping his hair out. And that's when I started cutting it. You know, when Vince got his head shaved, they had the good clippers, the ones that work, and they give me the goddamn ones that don't work.
I remember the one at SummerSlam '98 where they tried to do Jeff Jarrett's hair at the same time, and 4 people were trying to hack away at his head, and in the end, they just had to do it like with the barber's thing, and they ended up giving him actually quite a nice haircut. Right, so I'm going to go straight into a little personality test for WWE personnel in the 2004-2007 region. So I'm going to say something, you give me a name back. I don't know what it might be called. Let's just call it personality test. So we'll go for funniest person in the locker room.
Eugene.
You can't say yourself.
Oh, now you're putting rules on it. Yeah. Probably Regal.
Really?
Yeah, he's hilarious.
Worst taste in music.
I don't know, because like I'd roll with my car and then we would kind of listen to music, but you know, nobody ever really put any. I don't know. I didn't ride with everybody.
Last man standing at the bar.
Cena and Ric Flair.
Really, Cena? I would have thought he'd had like no fat to absorb the alcohol.
So Cena never drank in college. Came to OVW, had never drank. We went out on my birthday one night, and he goes, "All right, I'll buy you a shot and I'll do it with you." I'm like, "What?" So he took his first shot of alcohol with me, but he made me shoot 191. So we both shot it, and then he went home. And when he got on the road and Bradshaw got a hold of him, then he started kicking down the beers.
Fair enough. Most underrated?
I don't know, man. My brain's so beat up with chairs. It's kind of hard for a quick thing like that. I think Lance Cade. If Lance Cade would have carried on, he would have been world champion.
Who's created WWE's booking tank the hardest? Who's a victim of WWE's bad booking, let's say?
Well, I mean, the thing, what's a victim? I mean, if somebody makes money, you're still not a victim. It might not be what you would like, but the thing is the McMahon family runs the company and everything's based around them. You know? I don't know.
No, fair enough. Biggest ladies man on the road?
Carlito.
Really?
One of them, yeah.
Fair enough. Well, this is another driving one, I suppose. I was going to say worst driver.
Who was it? I think Trevor Murdoch got clocked doing 95 miles an hour with the police officer like right behind him and pull him over. And Big Show saw they were pulled over. So Big Show pulled over in front of him, got out, walked down. The police officer's like eyes are getting big, huge Big Show. And he looks at Trevor, he goes, "We got all day to get there. There's no reason for you to speed. Come on, keep your speed down," and walk back. And then that got him out of the ticket.
Dude, he sounds like the best passenger, if nothing else. Right, so we'll go straight to Vince McMahon. I was wondering how closely you worked with Vince McMahon, because I know he was sort of half involved with the Eric Bischoff thing here and there as well. But I mean, in the back, did he help develop your character? Or is that more like Brian Gewirtz?
No. He gave me a lot of direction, and for almost every segment that was on Raw, we would probably get his input. I wish I would have sat down and had a better relationship with him. When I injured my knee in 2005 at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view, I went to Birmingham to do therapy. At the Royal Rumble is where Vince tore both of his quads. Remember that?
Yes.
So he was there, and he had surgery there, and I knew he was in the hospital. So I just went right up there and went into his room. And I just said, hey, I'm here in town. I know you had somebody in town to run errands for me if you needed anything. But I just said, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, have somebody give me a call. And I regret that I didn't put a chair right next to his bed and just sit there until he forced me to leave and just talk his ear off. Oh, man, that's one thing I wish I would have done. I was nervous.
I was actually going to ask, did you notice any of his strange idiosyncrasies we hear so much?
Well, when I walked in the hospital room, he hadn't shaved. And also I could tell he was immediately uncomfortable. But no, I wasn't around him, too much. Nobody sneezed around him or anything.
So you didn't do any? Did you actually do any of the shopping in the end, or did you just send you on your way eventually?
Yeah, no, I just bailed. but then Stephanie McMahon called me about a week later and said that was a really nice thing to do. So cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Mid 2000s is probably the pinnacle of Triple H's domination of WWE, or specifically the Raw brand. Was there many grumblings in the locker room about this, or was it all sort of overblown? A couple of bad eggs sort of sending these things to the newsletters to stir it up a bit.
I mean, if it was, I didn't hear it. It was because I was so new, and plus I was getting pushed and used. If it was from anybody, it would be the guys that were right under that main event slot, wanting to break into the main event slot and feeling like they couldn't do it. I was brand new, and I was excited, and I was featured, had merchandise, and I was kind of a different character. If I would have been trying to go for that same ass kicking, main event guy, I might have felt it.
I don't know how much you, I suppose, spoke to him on a one-to-one basis or, personally, but was he more office or was he more one of the boys at this time, 2004 onwards?
I think he was one of the boys because he traveled with us all the time. And he would chip in, you'd come up with something for a match and might ask his opinion, and he would tweak it a little bit and make it better. I didn't, but sometimes he'd be on the headphones. He wasn't as office as probably he is now.
So I'll probably just skip ahead slightly then, and we'll go to Kurt Angle, because I must have completely missed this. I don't remember you wrestling. I must have missed a pay-per-view, and you had an entire thing going with the gold medal, didn't you? So where does he rank on the all-time list of greats you've wrestled and pleasures to be with?
Oh, he's phenomenal. My first dark match was the night after Owen died. We were in St. Louis, and I wrestled Kurt Angle before he was on TV. So I'd known Kurt for a while, but I had my knee surgery in, I think, the beginning of 2006, and I came back, and my first angle was with Kurt, and then Kurt wanted to wrestle me because they knew they were going to push him to wrestle Cena. So he's like, Vince is like, we need to get you a lot of heat. Who can you work with where you're going to get a lot of heat? And Kurt's like, well, give me Eugene. And at the time, I'd just come off my knee surgery. I'd probably come back too soon. And I watching the matches back now, like I couldn't run very well. I couldn't pivot, but it didn't matter. He just suplexed the hell out of me. But he had a lot of ideas for the angle. Like he wanted to do a thing where, because that's right when he started wearing the mouthpiece. And he wanted to do a thing where he busted his teeth and he had his teeth wired. That's what led to the mouthpiece. And he was flying in somewhere, and I took his gold medal from him on the when I returned. It was like a 3-minute challenge. I knocked him out of the ring, and I won his gold medal. So Eugene would come down the escalator at the airport, and there's somebody there with the sign that says Olympic champion. Somebody assigned Eugene. Eugene comes out with the gold medal. Well, you must be the Olympic champion. Come on, get in the limo. And Angle comes down with the mouthpiece, maybe hits something. And he said, oh, you must be Eugene. Let's put you in the short bus and take you to Raw. He had a lot of good, funny ideas, but in the end, they just said beat up Eugene, so that's what happened.
I take it you never actually got to touch the real gold medal. Was this like an approximation?
I assume so. Yeah.
A sort of a slightly heavier question, really, because this is Kurt Angle's admitted this himself that by this point he felt his career wasn't quite on the upward trajectory because I think he just wanted to be champion of the world, constantly like Triple H was. And also, he was quite beat up. He broke his neck twice. Did he ever sort of confided in you that he maybe couldn't do anything physically, or he was struggling at any point?
No, absolutely not.
No,
I was the one that had less ability at that time, and he was throwing me around, and he worked with me. He was great.
Right, so I'll go straight on to Hulk Hogan then. When was the
what
first
you
time?
Gonna do?
It's just he'd be one. He's number one. I'd love to talk to him because I know some people criticise him, but dude, he's Hulk Hogan. He's the man.
Mm-hmm.
First time you met him, was he just as Hulk Hogan as you hoped he'd be?
Yeah, like the first time I met him was at WCW when he was there, and I just shook his hand. But then when I got to work with him at WrestleMania 20, I mean, that was the best. That was 3 months after I had my knee surgery, and I really couldn't. I was moving. I probably wasn't even cleared to do anything. And I just remember when Muhammad Hassan, which is one of the guys that I started training in OVW, puts me in the camel clutch. Davarri's right there screaming in my face, and Hogan's music hit. I mean, that place exploded. So earlier in the day, he walks in and he's got, I think he had a yellow Hulkamania shirt on. And he looks in the mirror, he's got his, big bow on, and he takes it and he just throws it in the corner, and he pulls out whichever one he wore, either the red one or the tie-dye one. I can't remember. So I looked over there and the shirt's in the corner. Show goes on. By the end of the night, the shirt's still there, so I can go over and steal it. But the story I give is that, like I don't know if you've ever seen the Mean Joe Green Coca-Cola commercial from the 70s, where Mean Joe Green throws the jersey to the kid and he catches it in this big moment. That's my story. Hulk threw it to me and I grabbed it, and it was a connection, a moment we had right there. His hair and boa was blowing in the wind, and it was awesome.
Did you ever get to spend some like proper one-on-one time? Is it all business and how you doing, brother?
Yeah, just in the back, I mean, I wasn't gonna say anything anyway. I was scared to death, and what was I gonna say? I don't know. I'd be too nervous just to make dumb small talk with him.
Did you even feel nervous when you did the Hulkamania tour in 2009, I believe?
No, that was good. Well, I guess now you say, I forgot about that. Like, I spent some time with him there. I remember there was one day where we were all in the pool, and I mean, he was always really cool. I was happy to be there.
I'll probably go to a couple of random questions now. Wrestler's Court, were you ever summoned into the dock?
No, man. I kept my mouth shut. I showed up on time. I did what I was told. I didn't ruffle any feathers. I was never a court member or tried.
Fair enough. Well, I've actually written strangest, but I'll keep it on this. Strangest fight you ever witnessed?
You mean wrestling match or fight? What do you
mean?
No,
sorry, a real fight either backstage or in the bar afterwards between a couple of wrestlers.
Actually, there was one. We were in Missouri somewhere, and it was myself and my partner. It wasn't with WWE, it was an indie show, but we took on Kevin Thorne and Gangrel, and Luna was in their corner, and we had a girl in our corner that everybody said was getting ready to go to TNA, and she was like going to be a ballet, but she had no clue what she was doing. We were the baby faces, they were the heels. She walks around the corner and gets in Luna's face. Scratch that. They were the baby faces. Everybody knew it from TV. We were the heels. She walks around the corner. She gets in Luna's face, and Luna threatens, expecting her to back down, and she didn't back down. So Luna beat the piss out of her all the way up the aisle, and everybody turned and watched that. So I grabbed Gangrel in a headlock and said, we ain't doing nothing. Oh, nobody watching us, and beat her all the way through the curtain back into the locker room and screaming at her because she had no clue. And I never saw that ballet again.
No, so she never made it to TNA then?
No, absolutely not.
Right, I'm going to go on something slightly heavier. Did you work with Chris Benoit?
Yeah, absolutely. Benoit came in when I was in OVW. He came in and wrestled me Christmas Chaos, and I went 20 minutes with Benoit. And after that, the people of Louisville saw me as like WWE caliber wrestler. And then on the road, we would always confide in him and talk to him. I mean, I looked up to him very much. He was a hero.
So, I don't imagine you wrestled him on the main roster. I should have done my research slightly more. But do you ever wrestle him on the main roster?
Yeah. In the angle where I was friends with Benoit and Triple H, whatever, maybe Bischoff made the match that Eugene had to wrestle Benoit, and I covered him 1, 2, and he put his foot on the ropes, and Eugene thought it was 3, and I grabbed the title and my tag title, and I'm running around the ring like Rick Steiner. I was so blown up. It was rough. It was physical, but it was good. It was easy.
Yeah, I suppose really the main initial reaction, because I know you're William Regal, your former tag team champion partner, always gave a really ominous tribute video during Raw. He was the only one to do so, where everyone else was talking his praises. Do you sort of remember like the first way you heard the news and when you heard the full story?
Yeah, we were in Corpus Christi. We were doing, I guess it was a joint. We're supposed to do, I guess, was it Raw? Yeah, it was Raw. And then they sent us home and said, they found the family dead, and they didn't give us any any news. And I think I probably heard it the next morning on the news. Well, I take that back. It was starting to spread around the locker room. That's what they thought it was. and then I heard it on the news. I mean, it's unfortunate that everybody remembers your last performance. And if that's Chris's last performance, I mean, it's always going to taint his legacy. If they never put him in the Hall of Fame, I think that's warranted. But he should be remembered because it was a brain injury that caused that. And it was his incessant headbutts and wrestling hard. And we got to know that we can't take it that far, or that will continue to happen. The football players in the NFL are starting to have guys like that too. You know, like Junior Seau was a linebacker, shot himself, and I think he wrote a note that says, you know, look at my brain. And when they look at these things, you know, they start noticing that abuse like that is really, really damaging. When Chris Nowinski, when I first got hired as a coach, they brought Nowinski in to talk about concussions, and he said, like, anytime you bump and see stars, that's a concussion, and repetitively it just damages your brain. And I think he was one of them that looked at Benoit's brain and said he had the brain of like an 80-year-old man. And he was starting to come out with some other news, and immediately Vince, I think, contributed a little bit of money, and now he researches for WWE, and I haven't heard anything else from him. But I mean, I believe in my heart it was a brain injury that just something went wrong.
Yeah, do you think WWE handled it pretty much as best they could? Because I know there was talk of, you know, federal investigations into the business itself, and at one point it threatened to bring the entire wrestling business down, and then the media moved on to the next thing. Do you think WWE did basically what they should have done?
I think they did the best they could, you know, with the information at the time, and it's just an unfortunate tragedy that, you know.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, on to happier things now. I did want to get your opinion on that, but let's go on to happier things. Why turn Eugene heel?
Well, it would give me a different, you know, character longevity, and maybe, you know, if I could pull it off, but I don't know if I didn't want to do it, and that was why, you know, my performance wasn't the best, or they didn't have me turn on somebody that all the fans cared about it. If I would have turned on Shawn Michaels, that might have been something different. But it was just, you know, I didn't really think that Eugene should be a heel, but my ability as a performer might have hindered, you know, actually what could have been.
I think he was just too likable. I mean, why would you ever want to boo him unless you completely changed the character, and then the character isn't Eugene anymore anyway?
Well, Trish Stratus had pitched an idea where Eugene becomes infatuated with Trish Stratus, and she was the heel at the time. And then she starts, you know, backhandedly making him do things evil because he's in love with her, but it never made it.
In fact, just before I ask that, why did you get drafted to SmackDown then?
I don't know. I think it was just shuffling things up, because I went to SmackDown, and there was an idea to put me with Bob Holly. Very much the odd couple, like I was with Regal. Bob Holly always angry, and Eugene always having fun. And there was, I don't know if this was a joke or not, but they wanted to have me bring a monkey to the ring. That might have been a joke. I don't know if Peter would allow that, but, you know, Eugene with the monkey and Bob Holly always pissed off.
And that just never went anywhere then.
Didn't happen.
What sort of led to your leaving WWE? It was in 2007.
Yeah, 2007. Non-compliance to the wellness policy. I got one strike and I was let go.
Oh, right. Shouldn't you have got 3 strikes before what happened, or?
I don't know. My case was different, I guess.
Is that something you don't want to go into?
It was in Manchester where I had the incident in Manchester, right? Was that the town?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, but I thought, you know, it's your personal thing. I don't really want to ask.
I was working with Kurt Angle on my knee surgery, and I probably came back too soon. I had patella repair, which normally guys take about 9 or 10 months to come back. I came back in 6 months. And then I was taking a lot of medication to try to, you know, push myself through the pain. And we were at the hotel, and I had my food. I was eating in my room after the show, and I go to set it outside, and the door locked on me. So like pissed. So then I walked down to the lobby in my boxers and just passed out in the lobby with all the fans, Triple H, everybody in the lobby, and then got sent to the hospital. And then they sent me on a 9-week vacation, as we used to call it. It was just an incident that happened. But then one medication that I had is what I took, and I couldn't show that I had a prescription for it because the doctor that gave it to me committed suicide. So, you know, I got popped for something that I had a prescription for, because if you have a prescription, you can take it. But, you know, it was just, it was just every bad, you know, coincidence happened all at the same time.
No, but you're doing a lot better now, or at least you look like you're doing a lot better now. There you go.
Always.
Guns. One question that I genuinely want to know is how come when you left WWE, you continued on with pretty much the same Eugene character instead of maybe trying to reinvent yourself as Nick Dinsmore or maybe something completely different?
Because nobody knows Nick Dinsmore. I mean, the wrestling fans might know him, but everybody wanted Eugene, and that's what that's what I was going to get toured upon. If I try to go do something else, people are going to pay. Promoters are going to pay X amount for Eugene, and then, we're only going to pay Nick Dinsmore because Nick Dinsmore wouldn't draw as well as Eugene.
Oh, fair enough then. So you went back to WWE in 2009, but it was a very brief run, and you faced off with The Miz, I believe, when he was doing the Calvary Kid thing very briefly. Is The Miz as annoying as I imagine he is in real life?
Even worse.
How come you're... sorry, carry on.
No, I got hired and I came back, and then they said I wasn't in good enough shape, so they released me. But I never felt like Eugene had to be a body guy. I don't know. And it's like I saw him a couple weeks before, and they didn't say get in better shape. They didn't give me any direction. I don't know. It was just one of those things. I think Vince looked at it and didn't like it and said, get rid of him.
We also brought as as you were in OVW, like a wrestler, player, coach sort of thing. Or was it just going to be as a wrestler?
The initial direction I was given in 2009 was, I'll be a coach player on the road, and then I might go down to FCW for a week and work with the guys and might not even be on TV, but just go out there and have matches with them. And it didn't make it that far. But then I did end up getting hired as a coach in 2013, 2012.
That was actually going to be my exact next question. So OVW and Performance Center, you did that for a year. What was the experience like, I suppose? Because it would have been completely different.
It was phenomenal.
Even a few years ago, it would have been a complete shift in what you know as WWE, I suppose.
Yeah, I was hired as a coach when they were at the FCW building, and then they transitioned to Orlando to the Performance Center. And I mean, supposedly Triple H went to the New York Giants football training center and looked at what they had and said, okay, that's what I want. And it's got a huge gym, and it's got, where they do the confessionals where you can work on your promos. They've got rooms where you can watch videos, and all the coaches that are there, there's, 200 years of experience in coaches. And anytime you can go, hey, bounce these ideas. And absolutely loved it. Robbie Brookside was also one of the coaches there, and Regal was down pretty much every week. I was teaching the guys when I started, the people that were brand new, regardless if they had experience or not, they would come to my class first. And we would work on very simple rolls, bumps, run the ropes, get to know a little bit of moves. And then I think there were 5 different classes. People would move up the progression, and the guys that were on NXT were in the top class. But then also they'd have classes where it's open class and anybody could come. And like a lot of them would come, when Sasha and Bailey were there. And so who else? Braun Strowman started in my class. Chad Gable. So I got to work with a lot of them. It was really cool.
What's the difference between OVW training as you knew it in the late 90s, early 2000s and Performance Center training in the 2010s?
So for OVW, WWE contracted with an indie company to train their students. And with the Performance Center is that like that excellence that WWE has across the board. Their production, their travel, the way they, pretty much treat their stars, but just everything is like top of the notch, world class, best that there is. OVW, not knocking it, but it was an indie company that had a ring and a building. And, for wrestling, that's really all you need. But for WWE, that everything, the story went that when Triple H transferred from in-ring to more office, Vince said, I want you to go around to every station, every department in the headquarters and come back and give me a report. So he went, to marketing and to billing or whatever, and to overseas and all this stuff. And he came back and he goes, well, everything's like perfect except for that developmental. It's kind of fucked up. And he goes, okay, that's what you're going to be in charge of. Oh shit. So, but he's made it, world class, made it WWE perfection.
I've got probably a slightly heavier question now. So this is just my, and it will be a criticism, not of you. It will be a criticism. In OVW, and let's say the early 2000s, let's say from 1999 to 2007, I suppose, let's call it 8 years. I mean, how many legends and recognizable names it churned out? I won't even go, Cena, Randy, yourself, of course, Rico, just a load of people, a great recognition. In the same 8-year lifespan of the Performance Center, there really doesn't seem to be many stars breaking through. Is that a criticism of the Performance Center, or is that WWE's machine to transition people from NXT to the main roster and then book them properly?
I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer. I mean, it could have been recruiting. You know, when they recruited those guys, these guys were stars. They were something special the minute they walked in the room. Now maybe they're looking at athletes that are coachable, and they're not really, I don't know, maybe they don't have a scout out there trying to find that breakthrough star. When I was there, sometimes the learning was a little bit suppressed because the head coach at the time was a little overbearing. And I think a lot of guys were cautious to experiment and just try things. Because then when they got back, like Sami Zayn was wrestling. What's the one from England? The short kid.
Spud, Rockstar Spud.
No, one more. The man that gravity forgot.
Nope, I don't know. Everyone will be killing me for not knowing this.
He's in AEW now. Pac. He's in AEW now.
Oh, yeah,
Pac.
Neville.
I'm sorry, Neville. God, forgive me. Neville and Sami Zayn wrestled each other at a live event somewhere in Florida. And they were going out there and they did all kinds of stuff, shit that I couldn't do. And it was beautiful and it was great, but the crowd wasn't reacting to it. The crowd started chanting Byron Saxton because he was doing music. They started chanting at this guy in the front row. They're chanting at the referee. And they were just going on. And I got him back. I said, well, you guys got to entertain the in-house crowd. And they go, if we go back and we do that on film, it looks like shit and we'll get chastised. So when we go back and watch this match on film, we'll get praise and we'll get a better write-up. And I was just like, for me, in a live event, we're a live performance entertaining the in-house crowd. And you start doing too much TV speed wrestling and they lose it, which is unfortunate.
Is that part of the issue with just general overproduction from the TV show to right down to the grassroots level where you're training people from scratch? Is there maybe too little room for experimentation? Well, you said yourself too much. Not
well, that's when I was there. There's been a change in regime, so I don't know. Everybody I talk to says it's a little bit more lighter and carefree.
Right, so then I will go. I'll sort of end, or I might end on a couple of questions if you've got a few more minutes. But I've got a little segment that I end everything on, and I've finally given it a name. Do forgive me for this. It's called the firing line. So I'm gonna throw some names at you, sort of like the personality test. If you think they're cool, you tell me they're cool. If you don't think they're cool, say whatever you want about. If you've got a little story to throw in, please feel free. Funny little story to go through, and I'll give you some names. Gene Snitsky.
Stockings and painted toes. Like Gene, I mean, we were on a flight to the Philippines, and it was like a 16-hour flight. And the stewardesses were, on their feet the whole time. And at the end of the flight, he convinced one of them to take her shoes and her socks off so he could suck her toes. Oh. And on the plane, he's sucking on this woman's toes. I did a show with him, and we were in Australia. And like everybody had a I don't know, it was almost like an apartment that we were staying in, but it had like a deck you could walk out on. And he's out there in black stockings with his painted toes, smoking his cigar. But Gene was always a great guy, really cool.
Orlando Jordan. I should have ended on Gene, but Orlando Jordan.
Orlando was awesome. He was such a good athlete. There was a picture of him on one of his birthdays. Rocky Johnson trained Orlando, and Rocky Johnson and The Rock were there, and they've got this pie. All right, let's take the picture. 3, 2, 1, and The Rock put it right in Orlando's face. So the picture is with the pie on his face. But he was also on that tour in Australia I was talking about. He was living over there at the time. I don't know where he's living now, but he was a great athlete. I liked Orlando.
I'll have to try and hunt him out, actually. I didn't even think of his name to ask, but I might even have to hunt him out. You mentioned before Muhammad Hassan, or Hassan.
Yeah, this kid came, I think he was 18 or 19 years old. He moved to Louisville and he started training with me at OVW. At OVW, I had a class for everybody that was not under contract that was trying to get in. And we would train. And then guys that I thought were good enough, I'd say, hey, take a look at them. Johnny Jeter of Johnny the Spirit Squad, Chris Cage, who was Kalen Croft, I think, on SmackDown for a minute, Muhammad Hassan, JTG, Omaga's manager, Alejandro.
Yes.
Yeah, there was another one. But Muhammad Hassan, Mark Kopani, he caught on real quick, and he was fit and he was built and he got streamlined right into a great character. And I think he was a little green to be put in the spot, and it kind of came out. But I mean, he had a good run.
Christy Hemme.
Yeah, they put me with Christy when I started the run with Angle. And it was supposed to be, she was my cheerleader. And we were trying to do, I've never been a cheerleader. We're trying to do cheerleader moves where I hold her up and stuff like that. But, and then they also did the segment where Eugene kissed her. So that was pretty cool on live TV.
Definitely. Tyson Tomko.
I like Tomko. He came to Louisville and he was another one. He was the bodyguard for Limp Bizkit, and just a big menacing looking dude. He great to travel with. He would always have the hotel hooked up. He'd get the extended car, be on time. Hope he's doing well.
Yeah, I wouldn't have looked at him and thought of efficient.
Absolutely was, man.
Viscera, Mabel.
I love Big Vis. There's stories I could tell, but I best not. They might not. Someone might get upset. It was a good time in the Philippines, but he was just uber cool, ultra cool. He went on the Memphis territory too, so we kind of had that in common. But always inviting in the room, always a great guy. He wore a black singlet under his whatever he was wearing, and I never saw him out of that singlet. You never saw him change. He would be gone and come back, and he had this little fan, and he would just fan himself. Nelson Frazier.
I don't suppose you can give us like the PG version of that story in the Philippines, or is it just definitely not?
He's a hell of a man. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, fair enough then. Lillian Garcia.
Lillian was really nice. Like she was, for wrestling terms, I think she was kind of an outsider at times. But she would go on tours with us. She was always cool. I didn't get to know her real well, but she was always nice. And
Mike Bucci, Simon Dean,
Nova. Yeah, when Nova came to OVW, I'd never seen him wrestle, and then he was phenomenal. And he was another guy, I think, kind of like myself, that had all this wrestling expertise. And then when he pitched the character, it was kind of, you didn't have to do as much. You just had to do what the character was. And he got that sign. The Simon Dean stuff was great when they get those larger women in the ring and tell them that they need to do whatever in the Simon system. So when Eddie died, we were in Minneapolis at the Target Center. And we came in and the house was just like everybody in this back in the arena, everybody was just like astonished and emotional. And he and I went out. I don't know if we had the first match, but we had one of the first matches, and we did comedy, and everybody laughed. And all of a sudden, it was like this sigh of relief, like, okay, well, we can continue on. Life goes on. It sucks, but we can laugh. And it was a really cool moment. And I rode off on his little scooter.
Rene Dupree.
So Rene was hired when he was 18. And he was really young, but he had it. And then he got called up, and then Rob got called up with them. So I'd wrestle against 2 of the 3 La Resistance. Rene actually messaged me the other day. I like Rene. Super cool guy.
You mentioned before as well, Bob Holly.
Like Bob, when I first met him, so he came down from a neck injury. I was in OVW and I was player coach. He came down after his neck injury. We had class at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he was just as rough as you see him on TV. I mean, he didn't do anything in an unsafe spot, but everything was in there. And I took his finish, got up, shook his hand, and he was never rude to me. But when he did something to Rene, and I don't remember if this was on SmackDown, but he did something and he busted Rene's head, because I think Daivari and Rene were on the same flight back, and Rene got up to go to the bathroom, and this thing exploded, and all this blood was all over the bathroom, like a hematoma or something. So I saw Bob be rough on some people, but he was always cool with me.
I will admit to putting Rene's name and then Bob Holly's name together on purpose there. Jerry Lawler, because of course he was your boss in USWA and he commented on your matches for years.
I love the King. So, I mean, when I moved to Louisville, USWA was on every Saturday. I would go to the Louisville Gardens on Tuesday night, and Lawler was the King. Lawler could do so much by doing so little, and just watching him when it was at one point, I think it was after my knee surgery, I was coming back. I can't remember. Maybe it wasn't. Regardless, there was a show at the Mid-South Coliseum. Lawler put it on, and I wrestled Lawler and Corey Macklin, who's an announcer, against me and Jimmy Hart at the Mid-South Coliseum, which is like the building that we always saw. Lawler sold out the Mid-South Coliseum more times than Elvis. I love the King. I'd always sit and talk to him. He'd give me advice and, hey, you should do this. The one time Eugene had a Band-Aid, right? Band-Aid. And I wanted to put a smiley face on it, but my artistic skills aren't as good. So I asked him to do it. So he put the big smiley face on me. Love the King.
You know, I should actually ask about Corey Macklin. Did he ever try and sell you the Memphis Library, even though he didn't own it?
No. Corey was actually nice to me. He brought me in. I mean, good dude.
The coach.
Coach is awesome. Always one of the nicest guys to me. And he was in a great spot because he was on TV. He was featured, but he didn't have to wrestle too much. And then he didn't have a lot of experience, and they put me in an angle with him. And I thought it came off great. So then 2 years ago, he messaged me, and he came. I own a company now in Sioux Falls, Midwest All Pro Wrestling. He came in and wrestled me in Midwest All Pro. His father had, I think, a heart transplant, and he was trying to get awareness out there for, heart transplant, sign the card, donor card, whatnot, and really get people to become aware to save lives, because it saved his father's life. And he lost like 30 pounds to get in shape for this, and came down and we wrestled, and damn it, he beat me.
Umaga. You mentioned his name earlier as well, actually.
Like, I'd known Umaga, Eddie, for a while. He was in HWA, and I've been around, but I never wrestled him. And I saw him wrestle people, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, he's beating that shit out of people. And I had to wrestle him, and I was so scared and like tensed up, and it was like he just touched me, just barely. And after that, it was easy. Then I trusted him. I could open up, I give him my nose, and he'd throw a kick and be right there. We were wrestling, I think in Brussels maybe, and he had me down. He's gonna put me in a hold, and all of a sudden he sees all the photographers, and this is where I learned this. He just quarter turned me and put me in a hold, and there's all the photographers. They get their picture, and then we carry on and do whatever we're going to do. That way we get a picture, hopefully in the wrestling magazine.
I'm saying, I'll tell you, when you have to work towards the hard camera, less people work towards the photographers these days. That's some real awareness. Two more. Great Khali.
Khali was all right guy. Khali was sometimes, I'm not going to say dangerous, but a little rough. He'd want to throw the overhand chop and just chop you, which he might hit you in the ear. He might hit you in the forehead. But if he grabbed a hold of you, he had better balance, and he could. And I said, I had to convince him. I said, knock me down with something and then pick me up with one hand and then give it to me. Okay. Yeah. But he was always good with me. He never, his finish was horrible. That thing bomb. Every time I took it, I'd probably get concussion, but I'd see the spots and my hands would go numb. And he was just, bam.
I'll give you one more, and I'll probably just cut this slightly separately. Is WWE Hall of Fame's latest inductee, Molly Holly.
She's awesome. She was training in Louisville for a bit, so I got to know her there. And I remember we wrestled in Minneapolis when she wasn't on the road with us, but she came to the show, and I was in the first match, and I got a reaction off taking somebody's arm. Tom Cole, I just took his arm, and the crowd went crazy. And she goes, I've never seen anybody get a reaction off something so small. But Molly was really smart in the business, and a really good girl. Nice lady.
Speaking of WWE Hall of Fame, how would you handle the Hall of Fame if you were handling the Hall of Fame? Because at the moment, it seems to be a bit of many deserving people going in, but it does seem to be rather a checklist of we need to have one woman, we need to have one non-white person, and doing it that way. How would you... and also, there seems to be a lot of, they call it legacy inductions now. Mm-hmm. How would you sort of deal with that? Would you focus more on the legacy people? How would you sort of maybe change the Hall of Fame?
I have no idea. That's kind of like, I don't know. I think what they're doing is good, because in the age we live in now, you got to represent everybody. But all those people are worthy of it, and I think the people that are worthy should get in. I think they're doing a good job.
Was there any blowback from maybe disability charities when the Eugene character first came on WWE television?
When I first started doing Eugene, it was probably, can't remember, 4 or 6 weeks before I ever had my first match. And I personally never received any blowback, but I'd heard some rumblings of maybe newspapers or magazines or radio disc jockeys in the morning be like, what's WWE doing now? Why are they doing this? This is in bad taste. But the minute Eugene had his first match against Rob Conway and I won, then everybody got it. There's like, oh my gosh, this is an underdog story of a wrestling fan achieving his dream. And after that, I didn't hear any backlash. I've actually gotten a lot more positive affirmation than I have any kind of, I can't believe you're doing that. There'd be people come up to me my younger brother has disabilities. And when you started wrestling and winning the tag titles, he told me I could do anything because Eugene can. Or, my son had disabilities and he loved Eugene. And, you really gave him a positive outlook. So I think I did, a lot of positive for people that, that's a cross section of society that needs to be represented. And, Kurt Angle wanted to bring in I think it was Taekwondo Special Olympics champion to wrestle me. And I was all for it, but Vince ended up squashing it, but I think he would have beat the shit out of me.
Was it something that maybe he couldn't quite control?
No. Kurt said he could spar and he could work, but, he probably just would have beat the shit out of me.
How long did it take for maybe Make-A-Wish to get involved? Because I imagine, I've not actually looked this up, I imagine you were one of the more requested Make-A-Wish.
It was always Cena. It was always Cena. I did some. I would go like if Cena was requested, sometimes they'd send down 10 guys, but Cena was the one, and he's the Superman of that. He's done, I don't know how many he's done now, but at the one point it was over 500, more than any other, Make-A-Wish in history, and the most requested of all time. I mean, he really would go out of his way, no matter how he felt, no matter how busy he was, to go down and spend time with them. And like he'd spend with some people, he'd spend all day with them. Go out to eat with them. I mean, he's a really good guy.
Yeah, I always think the same thing about Hulk Hogan because people criticize him, but I hear so many stories of just how much effort he put into Make-A-Wish and just, making a fan feel special.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing is now technology has gotten so much better. The percentage of those Make-A-Wishes aren't actually dying, which is awesome. But with Hogan, like so many kids were buried with the Hulkamania shirt or belt or whatever they had. He was a huge influence.
Of all the WWE legends and, huge names from the past that you work with, and you work with loads. I mean, you work from, The Rock, I believe, Hogan, Kurt Angle. I'm very surprised. Who's the best? Who was just the man?
Well, Kurt was probably the one that I actually wrestled the most. But when I did the thing, it was in Dallas, and Harley Race was out there. It was just a segment where Eugene runs out, and he's like seeing all of his heroes. And Dusty was out there, and the $1 Million Man. I laid down, put money in my mouth. And then Kevin Von Erich was out there in Dallas, and that's when Conway had come out and got a little, and they put the claw on him, and it exploded. Man, give me goosebumps thinking about it. Worked with Kamala and Hacksaw, probably with the tag with Hacksaw for a good couple months. We had a good run. Hacksaw at that time was limited in what he could do. And most of the time we're working with either Spirit Squad or Umaga. And I knew that like Umaga said, I want to do this. And I knew Jim couldn't take it. So I said, hey, how about you give me this? And then you give him that move that I knew Umaga could do that I knew Jim could take. And I remember Jim pulled me aside one day. He goes, I see what you're doing. You're really protecting me. And I want to thank you. He's like, years ago, they just would have let the old timers, look like shit, but you're really protecting me. So, that's something that's really cool.
ECW One Night Stand 2006, I sort of thought that was a massive mistake having you on there because it made people, give people a reason to laugh at Eugene instead of being Eugene's corner, even though it was the Philadelphia crowd and, no, I'm sorry, it was the New York crowd, apologies.
Yeah.
I sort of thought that was a bit of a, something the character didn't necessarily need with the Sandman.
Yeah, but it was good for New York City.
Fair enough then.
I mean, right. that crowd was hot that night. In my opinion, that crowd wanted to riot. They had the big sign, if Cena wins, we riot. And like, they were like hostile. I sat in Cena's match. I sat by the curtain, and if like they had security, but like if anything was going to go down, I was just going to hit the ring. Like if he needed to fight his way out, and they were right there. And then when RVD won, honestly, in my opinion, it was almost like, oh, we don't get to riot. Like they were excited, but it's like they were ready to fight. I mean, these were pissed off New Yorkers, half drunk, ready to fight, and they didn't get it. But
you didn't make it to the 2005 one though, did you?
No, which one did I do? I did the second one.
Yeah, you did the second one. That was with that was the first one was with all the WWE people in the balcony.
Yeah, they had them up in the stands. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Blue Meanie ended up catching one in the face from Bradshaw.
That would happen every now and then.
I won't ask who might have warranted that and who might not have. But I will ask you because we've gone well over an hour already. So cheers for the time. Cheers for the Rick Steiner mustache. I do appreciate a mustache. I can't grow one. I we'll give the floor to you now and do some plugs, especially for your Midwest. Is it Midwest All Pro Wrestling?
Yep.
I can read on your T-shirt. So, I've just read it.
Yes. Eugene's Twitter is at the letter UGENE Dinsmore DINSMORE, and I run Midwest All Pro Wrestling in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Our Twitter is at Midwest All Pro. We're on Facebook. We're on the Instagram, but my favorite is the YouTube channel. Midwest All Pro Wrestling is the Midwest All Pro YouTube channel. The Nick Dinsmore is my YouTube channel. I just went over 10,000 subscribers, so I'm all excited. Hopefully I can get some more. If anybody has any, if anybody wants to know anything about Midwest All Pro Wrestling, our website is midwestallpro.com.
And there you go. That's the podcast. So thank you very much for watching or listening. I suppose, you know, if you're blind. So for me, James, of this YouTube channel, and for Nick Dinsmore, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you again next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.